I want to take a slightly different approach to this because I think we all can agree in this room we need a strong military. We need one that isn't the equal of other countries. Why? We play away games. We don't want to play home games for all the reasons you've heard here. We also don't want to play fair games. The NFL and Major League Baseball can have salary caps so we can even the playing field and have really neat games. That's not how we want to deter or fight our wars. We want superiority, better trained people, better equipment, better organization. All right? We also want the equipment and training to ensure that the lives of our people, men and women, are protected to the best of our ability. Right? You also want to make sure that those are the best people. Right? And you're paying them appropriately, and you give them the proper benefits afterwards. And we're doing that in multiple theaters. Why? Because we worry about Asia, where we get most of our economic trade. We worry about the Middle East because of oil and because of jihadis. And we worry about Europe because last time somebody tried to control all of Europe, we didn't like the idea. So when you add all that up, we want a large, capable military able to go in a bunch of different places at the same time, as well as protect us in the homeland. That costs money. So what I'm really going to talk about here is two aspects of money, right? Because we all agree on it's a hollow military going smaller. You heard Admiral Lyons, you heard Peter Husey. So the question in part is what to do about it. There's two parts of that. One is you have to be willing to spend some money. And the second piece I want to talk about this is we need to reform the way the Pentagon spends that money. So let me go through some charts. I apologize for charts. The other two dangerous statements that one can make in a briefing. One is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And the other one is, I have view graphs. I hate doing this. I don't like talking with view graphs, but I'm doing this because there's a lot of numbers, and I don't want to just inundate you and make you all go blind from numbers. I'm sure Frank and company can give you copies of this if you want to look at them in detail. But I'm going to go very fast through the numbers, but believe me, they're here, and they're CBO numbers, Congressional Budget Office. They're not my numbers, they're not Democratic numbers, not Republican numbers. All right, point here is, we can spend all day talking about this. We are hemorrhaging money. We are going to be spending on the current path. We can change that in the election path. $1 trillion a year we don't have out into the future. Only way to fix that, other than reforming entitlements, reforming government spending, reducing the size of government, is to tax everybody, at least 15 to 20%. That's CBO numbers. I'm here to tell you it's between 25 and 50% because all the other things are going up. You got Obamacare, the list goes on and on. And we're going to have, pre-K for everybody as a right for everybody, for the kids. So money that we don't have. Next chart, please. Right? So the question is, where is the money going to come from? Moreover, let me tell you, we're looking at having to start increasing interest rates. What happens when you increase interest rates? The interest we pay on the debt goes up. Every 1% increase in the interest on the debt is $200 billion a year, minimum. That's for today's debt. So you go from 1 to 3%, 3%, not a bad home mortgage rate, right? That's going to cost $400 billion a year extra, which is about 70% of the current defense budget, just on extra interest on the debt. Next one, please. If you think this is a defense problem, I've heard people, mostly liberal, but people say, but frankly, some from the Libertarian Party is, oh, cut defense, right? I mean, it's a wasteful program, all the rest. You can get rid of the defense budget. Cut it today, you will still be seeing deficits in the $500 to $600 billion a year, right, going forward, based on the previous charts. Zero defense budget, still haven't solved your problem. You can tax all the 1%ers, 100%. Won't solve the problem. Okay, so point here is, it's the domestic problems. Let me give you the next chart. In comparison, looking over time, we do things in GDP terms because that way you normalize across budgets from different administrations. So GDP is that you heard Peter talking about the use of GDP. Here's what it looks like going out to 2025, 10 years from now, not a long time. This is projected simply on the mandated. This is without any kind of major change. Defense spending is going down, dropping like a rock, while the problems are growing. All right? In addition, as you all know, you buy a car every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years. The new car, even if it looks the same, it's the same dealership, it's the same brand and all the rest, costs more. price of materials goes up, price of labor goes up, all the rest. There's an inflation factor in everything. Common things we buy. Now, if you buy a smaller car, if you buy a different car, not the same case. So when you go from one tank to another, from one airplane to another, buy a new bomber, buy a new missile, whatever the case is, over a 30-year period, you can't buy it for the same amount of money. All right? Happens in your own lives. It happens in the defense area. So if I have my defense budget going down, even if I keep everything exactly the same, there's no more people, no more tanks, no more airplanes, but have to replace them over time, I have to pay more. I have an inflation factor. Declining budget, rising inflation, if you want to call it that, for defense goods. And if you think about high-end items, sophisticated airplanes and the rest, they rise at higher than the average inflation rate. As a result, right, the purchasing power of those residual dollars drops. So I don't just have a delta here. It's wider. It's a bigger problem because the value of each of those dollars for a fixed number of people, planes, and tanks, and all the rest goes down. So let's just take for an idea for the moment. Go to the next chart, please. If there isn't going to be any more money, sort of what do we do? Right? My argument is it's time to go where the money is, the old Willie Sutton approach. And it's not in buying weapon systems. You keep hearing about this. Oh, cut the waste fat. The Pentagon has spent tens of billions of dollars on programs that never saw daylight. Absolutely true and almost meaningless. We have had in the last 15 years, $46 billion of investment in new programs that never got completed. Stopped in the middle for all it. In the last 15 years, while the defense budget was over $1 trillion, do the math, 4%. It's all it is. Over a 15-year period, on an annual basis, it's percent and a little less than a percent, right? Even if you took it, we got everything on acquisition perfectly right. All the planes, trains, and automobiles and all that. It's only 25% of the budget. The real money is behind the scenes. It's in personnel, operations, and maintenance. 2/3 of the budget in that area. We spend $200 billion a year on what they call logistics. Moving stuff, supplying forces, moving personnel. When you move personnel in their households between Europe and the United States, Middle East, all that, between bases, it can cost a lot of money. And these costs are increasing faster than the rate of inflation, or the cost of acquisition. All right? So we need to think about how we can make this efficient. Next chart. Pentagon likes to talk about the fact that if it were a business, it would be like the largest single business in the world. It would also be one of the worst managed businesses in the world. Even as we've been cutting over the last few years, forces, units, training, all that kind of stuff, we've been increasing the number of people in the DoD headquarters. Writ large. That's just the Pentagon. That's all those people that are in that headquarters thing. In fact, the last Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, put out a memo, put out an order, we're going to cut headquarters by 20%. They were hiring more people. Now, if you're a business, small business, large business, right, you have declining revenues or stagnant revenues, right? You've got a problem of obsolescence of equipment that has to be replaced. Do you cut your workforce and hire more people for the office? Don't think so. That's what the Pentagon does, right? We also burden this Pentagon with regulations, reporting requirements, all kinds of things that are absolutely insane. For example, recent report, the Navy has a requirement that everything it buys be certified as being corrosion resistant, including software. Got it? Now, that doesn't take up much time because you check a box, but the point is, that's how antiquated our acquisition system can be. Here are two quotes, one from a former Deputy Secretary of Defense. It's our regulations. This is the kind of boot we talk about on the civilian side, boot on the neck of the private sector. It is worse even than the private sector when it comes to the military. Unbelievably. There is a requirement for what they call certified cost and pricing data, not just for the F-35, but for every part that goes into it, all the way down to the chain, to the nuts and bolts and paint that might be bought from a supplier 5 levels down, who's a totally commercial entity who doesn't collect that data. Because if you think about it, if you're in the commercial sector, I mean, you know your prices, you know the costs of what you do, but you're sort of doing this whole kind of, keeping an eye on it. You're not collecting data that is certifiable. You can prove it for everybody you sell to. That's what's required in the defense business, because God forbid the government doesn't get the perfect deal. Which means, if you look at it, the second quote, this is from somebody who's done like an advisor on business affairs to the Defense Department, who said, think about it, you'd rather get a 5% spend more and have in the net a higher profit in absolute dollar terms than a lower price for the government if the company gets a higher profit. There is a war on the private sector coming out of the Defense Department. There's a reluctance to use commercial best practices. They don't like to do what everybody else has to do, what all other businesses have to do, what most state and local governments have to do. They want to have a special thing where they can do a unique accounting system, unique reporting requirements, argue with you about your profit, sealing it, and all the rest. And one of the problems with this, of course, is if you have to have an entirely new accounting system and people trained in it, how many small businesses are going to do business with the Pentagon? Secretary of Defense went out to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is a place where companies like Apple and Google have 40% margins. Now, you can argue with that. That's fine. You don't want to buy from Apple for its iPhones. Don't do it. You don't want to use Google. Don't do it. Up to you. But they have 40% gross margins. Pentagon says you can't have a gross margin nominally higher than about 10%. So if you're Google, you really want to do business with the Pentagon? I can make 40% in the private sector, 10% working for the government, and yet the government's going out there pleading with them, right? So even if you didn't spend another dollar, you can't continue this system and get the cutting-edge private sector companies to do business with you. Next chart. So this is based on a study that we did at the Lexington Institute on why defense costs so much and how to fix the problem. If you think about back office procedures, we're not cutting a single soldier, not a single airplane, not a single tank. I'm going to fund Peter's nuclear modernization program out of this. Where can you save money? Just fixing the accounting system could save you up to $5 billion a year. Getting DoD out of businesses that the private sector can do. For example, we have a whole separate approach for commissaries. I'm not against commissaries for military personnel and retirees, but turn it over to Walmart. Give everybody a card, special card, turn it over to Walmart. Somebody who does this for a living and makes a lot more money at it and is professional and all the rest. Just an example. And you tell them, look, I want to save money on this, and we'll have a contract. And the contract is, you make money, I make money kind of thing. So go down this list. Using proven fleet management approaches. Well, we do what the airlines do with their aircraft, what Hertz and Avis do. You can save $5 to $10 billion a year. There's a whole slew of it. If you add this up, that's a lot of money. Just one or two more charts and I'm out of things. Okay, next one. Here's something, you can Google this. Defense Business Board, the premier advisory group to the Department of Defense on business-related activities. Defense Business Board, you can Google it, right? Had a study published this past January. This was, that's the one. Yep. This was done at the behest of the Pentagon. And it's the study that sort of died quietly. It's on their website, but, all right? This was by two long-term senior commercial business leaders. And they had a whole board of people. They went and interviewed everybody. This was a really good, thorough study. They said you could save $125 billion over the next 5 years, $25 billion a year, all right, simply by reforming the back office processes. All right? Then we can figure out to spend a few extra dollars if we're really being tight-fisted about it to bring defense back up to where it needs to be. Right? You don't have to sort of, make the kids, like the Democrats want to call it, make the kids starve and ruin education. None of that is necessary. Real simple things. Every business does it. They simply went in and said, can we do it in the Defense Department? Oh, hell yes. Absolutely. The report not only died, they threw the two guys who authored this off the Defense Business Board. All right? This should tell you that's the right answer. Last chart. Got to be, right? Okay. I will argue to you, if we don't go any lower, just freeze it now. It's possible to have the military we need without having to spend more money. Can't spend less. And if you don't do these reforms, you will have to spend more. We all agree. First slide I had, right? We want this military. We want it to be first rate. We want it to be big enough to do the things it needs to do, cover the whole range from Al-Qaeda on this end to Russian nukes on that end. You simply are going to have to pay the freight one way or the other. Reforming the system means you pay a lot less in the future without losing a single soldier, sailor, airman, or whatever. You reduce unnecessary activities, decrease the hand or the boot of government on private industry, get rid of costly regulations that make no sense, use commercial best practices. How about using the same accounting standard that the SEC and everybody requires that Dodd-Frank requires? just a single replacement of 2 accounting systems, one more onerous than the other, with a simple commercial best practices will save you billions a year. It's not brain surgery in all this. All right? And then you can modernize the force, and in whichever way we all want to argue about modernizing the force, that's the end of my pitch. Thank you.